The elegant facade of Helen Sinclair's life on Philadelphia's prestigious Main Line had always been meticulously maintained. 15 years as the supportive, socially adept wife of Richard Davies, principal architect and owner of the highly successful Davies Design Group, required it. Their sprawling stone colonial, the charity galas, the country club memberships. It was a world built on Richard's soaring ambition and Helen's quiet competence in managing the intricate social architecture that underpinned his success. Few remembered Eleanor Ellie Jenkins, the sharp, passionate development director who had once energized the city's arts collective, before gradually scaling back her own career to cultivate Richard's. That vibrant professional self felt like a ghost limb now, phantom aches reminding her of ambitions sacrificed for the sake of marital harmony and Richard's ever-expanding ego. Lately, the harmony felt increasingly strained, the elegant facade developing hairline cracks. Richard's late nights at the studio became the norm, his client dinners more frequent, his business trips often extended with vague explanations. He'd become critical, dismissive of her opinions on everything from decor to current events. An unfamiliar, expensive cologne sometimes clung to his suits. Helen, pragmatic and conflict-averse by nature, had pushed down the rising unease, attributing his distance to the stress of landing the massive Atherton Tower project. Then came the diagnosis, delivered with quiet finality by Dr. Chen, in a sterile examination room that smelled faintly of antiseptic. Stage 2, invasive ductal carcinoma, breast cancer. The words hung in the air, clinical and terrifying. Helen, usually so adept at processing information, felt her mind go numb. She absorbed the details, lumpectomy, radiation, favorable prognosis due to early detection, with a strange sense of detachment, as if analyzing a particularly grim case study rather than her own mortality. She drove home through the perfectly manicured streets, the diagnosis of cold, heavy secret clutched tight in her chest. She needed Richard, needed his support, his partnership, the bedrock of their 15 years together. She rehearsed how she'd tell him, calmly, factually after dinner, focusing on the positive prognosis. She found him in his home office, hunched over architectural renderings, phone pressed to his ear, deep in an animated discussion about zoning appeals for the Atherton Tower. He waved her away impatiently as she hesitated in the doorway, mouthing "later!" before turning back to his call, completely oblivious to the storm gathering in her eyes. She retreated, the unspoken message brutally clear. His work, his ambition came first. Always. Later that evening she tried again, finding him pouring a scotch in the library. "Richard?" she began softly. "Can we talk for a few minutes? It's really important." He sighed, swirling the amber liquid, glancing at his watch. "Ellie, honestly, not the best time. The Atherton Group presentation is first thing tomorrow. I'm absolutely swamped. Plus," he added, his tone shifting to impatient command, "we have the Franklin Institute Gala tonight. You are ready, aren't you? The mayor will be there. Wear the navy Herrera gown, it's more impactful, and try to look engaged tonight, will you? You seemed distracted last week." He didn't ask what was wrong, didn't register the unnatural stillness in her posture, the slight tremor in her hand. His utter self-absorption, his casual dismissal of her need at a moment of profound personal crisis, struck Helen with the force of a physical blow. Her life-altering diagnosis was merely an inconvenient interruption before a gala. The distance she had sensed for months solidified into an unbridgeable chasm. Telling him now, revealing her vulnerability to this man who clearly didn't see her anymore beyond her function as his social accessory, felt impossible, degrading. "You're right," she heard herself say, her voice sounding unnaturally calm. "It can wait. Just confirming the car service for tonight. I'll go finish getting ready." He nodded, already turning back to his glass, dismissing her. Good. 7 sharp. That night, standing alone in their large, silent bedroom after Richard had left early for a pre-gala meeting, Helen made a decision born of hurt and a sudden chilling clarity. She would face the cancer diagnosis alone, for now. Sharing it with Richard felt like offering a vulnerability he no longer deserved, an intimacy he was clearly incapable of reciprocating. A few weeks later, still reeling privately from her diagnosis and navigating the first round of surgical consultations, Richard chose his moment. It was another Tuesday evening, again in the supposed sanctuary of their home. He intercepted her in the hallway as she came in from a long day, presumably having just returned from meeting Chloe Miller, his young, ambitious designer assistant. "Ellie," he began. Avoiding her eyes, his tone clipped, rehearsed. "We need to talk." He led her into the living room, but didn't sit. "This isn't easy, but this isn't working anymore. Hasn't been for a while." He delivered the cliches like lines from a script. "We've grown apart. We want different things. I need space to figure out my path forward." He finally looked at her, his expression carefully neutral. "I want a divorce." Ellie sank onto the sofa, feeling a strange numbness overlaying the expected pain. "After 15 years, Richard? Just like that?" He nodded, already seeming impatient to get it over with. "It's better for both of us. A clean break?" "Is there someone else?" she asked quietly, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it. He hesitated, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Yes, it's Chloe Miller, from the firm." He had the audacity to add, "It wasn't planned, Ellie. These things just happen." Before the divorce papers even arrived, Helen found the concrete proof she didn't strictly need, but which galvanized her resolve. Richard, in his haste or arrogance, left his personal iPad charging on his home office desk. A notification from Chloe M. popped up. Curiosity, cold and sharp, prompted Helen to unlock it. His passcode, predictably, was still their anniversary date. She found not just confirmation, but months of intimate messages, plans for romantic getaways disguised as site visits, photos that made her stomach churn, and discussions about their future after Richard sorted things out with his difficult wife. The depth of the planned deception solidified her decision to play the long game Arthur Vance would soon reveal to her. The official news of her beloved Uncle Marcus Sinclair's passing after a short illness arrived amidst this personal turmoil, a genuine blow that momentarily overshadowed her own crises. Marcus, a shrewd, self-made industrialist, unmarried and childless, had always been more of a father figure to Ellie than her own distant parent. He championed her education, quietly celebrated her career successes before Richard, and offered gruff but insightful advice. She contacted his longtime estate lawyer, Mr. Harrison Bell, a pillar of old Philadelphia law firms, to express her condolences and handle necessary formalities. They met the following week in Bell's quiet, wood-paneled office. After dispensing with condolences, Bell leaned forward, his expression serious. "Eleanor," he began, using her full name as Marcus always had. "Marcus held you in the very highest esteem. He admired your intellect, your resilience, your integrity. He also," Bell paused delicately, "harbored significant concerns about Richard's character and financial judgment for many years." Bell then revealed the stunning core provision of Marcus Sinclair's meticulously crafted will. Beyond leaving Ellie the bulk of his considerable liquid assets and appointing her successor trustee of his charitable foundation, Marcus had executed a masterstroke of protective planning. Distrustful of Richard and anticipating a scenario exactly like the one now unfolding, Marcus had, over several years, quietly and strategically, acquired controlling interest, a clear 51% equity stake plus critical outstanding debt notes, in Richard's own firm, Davies Design Group, often through discrete third-party transactions. This controlling interest was now bequeathed solely, irrevocably, and as separate property to Eleanor Jenkins Sinclair. Her soon-to-be reclaimed maiden name explicitly stated. "Marcus wanted you to have leverage, Eleanor," Bell explained gently, seeing the shock on her face. "Protection. True independence should you ever find yourself needing it. Richard," he added grimly, "has absolutely no idea about the extent of Marcus's holdings in his company. He assumed Marcus was just a passive, minor investor from years ago." Ellie sat stunned, processing the confluence of events. The cancer diagnosis, Richard's betrayal, the divorce demand, and now this. Inheriting not just wealth, but power, the very control Richard craved over his own professional life. The thick envelope from Richard's divorce attorney arrived the next day. Following Arthur Vance's, Mr. Bell's implicit counsel and her own rapidly solidifying strategic instincts, Ellie reviewed the standard settlement terms regarding the house and known joint assets. Then, keeping the explosive knowledge of her inheritance and company control an absolute secret, she signed the papers quickly, agreeing to his terms for those assets, and sent them back. Let Richard finalize the divorce he initiated. Let him believe he held all the cards. While he planned his triumphant new life with Chloe, Ellie scheduled her lumpectomy and authorized Mr. Beldy to discreetly engage as a top forensic accounting firm. Their mandate conducted deep, immediate audit of Davies Design Group's finances, using Ellie's impending majority shareholder status as the legal basis for access. The game had changed irrevocably. Richard thought he was closing a chapter. Ellie was preparing to rewrite the entire book. The weeks following Ellie's quiet agreement to Richard's divorce terms became a strange, bifurcated existence. By day, she navigated the emotionally and physically taxing world of cancer treatment, consultations, surgery, the debilitating onset of radiation therapy. Her sister Megan was a constant, driving her to appointments, offering quiet comfort. Her neighbor David Miller checked in, bringing meals. Arthur Vance called regularly, his gruff encouragement a surprising anchor. In this sphere, she was Eleanor Jenkins again, having legally reclaimed her name. A patient focused on healing, supported by genuine, uncomplicated care. But in the evenings, fueled by coffee and a cold, meticulous anger, another part of her life unfolded in secret. Armed with the explosive knowledge of her inheritance, controlling interest in Davy's design group, and advised by Uncle Marcus's shrewd lawyer, Mr. Harrison Bell, she initiated a covert operation. Bell discreetly engaged a top-tier forensic accounting firm. Using Ellie's soon-to-be official majority shareholder status, as Marcus's will swiftly cleared probate, to legally compel access, the accountants began a deep dive into the financial labyrinth of Richard's prestigious firm. Ellie, meanwhile, focused on her radiation treatments, conserving her energy, playing the parts of the quietly recovering divorcee. Richard, utterly oblivious, finalized the divorce with unseemly haste. He quickly moved Chloe Miller into the mainline house, overseeing the rapid, expensive renovations that erased Ellie's presence. News of their engagement followed shortly after, splashed across the society pages, and then came the invitations for their lavish engagement party, celebrating their new beginning at the just-completed Atherton Tower, the gleaming monument to Richard's success, the jewel in the Davies Design Group crown. He had no idea the foundation of that tower, and his entire life was riddled with fraud, or that the woman he'd discarded now held the power to detonate it all. Just as Ellie completed her final draining radiation session in the late September, feeling physically weak but mentally fortified, Mr. Bell delivered the forensic accountant's preliminary report. It was damning. Worse than Ellie or even Arthur had suspected. Richard hadn't just been mismanaging funds. He had orchestrated a sophisticated, years-long pattern of embezzlement. Inflated invoices to phantom subcontractors, substantial kickbacks demanded from suppliers, explaining some of his lavish spending, and the smoking gun, a $3 million business expansion loan secured 2 years prior from a major Philadelphia bank. The loan application contained demonstrably false financial statements for Davies Design Group, significantly overstating assets and revenues. More critically, the personal guarantee section required both Richard's and Ellie's signatures, collateralizing not just business assets, but also significant shared marital property, including equity in the mainline house they then jointly owned. Ellie stared at the copy of the signature page the accountants had obtained. It wasn't her signature. Richard had forged her name on a multi-million-dollar loan guarantee. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Richard's desperation for the divorce, his insistence on a quick, standard settlement regarding the house equity he thought they'd split, his recent financial pressures. It wasn't just about funding his life with Chloe. It was likely about consolidating assets and potentially hiding this massive, fraudulent debt before it imploded. Ellie now held all the cards. The controlling interest in his company, proof of extensive embezzlement and kickbacks, and irrefutable evidence of felony forgery and bank fraud. Mr. Bell advised her they had enough to proceed with immediate legal action, both civil and potentially criminal. But Ellie had waited this long. She wanted the reckoning to be precise, public, and delivered at the apex of Richard's perceived triumph, the Atherton Tower engagement party. On the night of the party, Ellie arrived fashionably late, stepping out of the discreet car service Arthur Vance had arranged. She wore the slate blue dress, her reclaimed name, Eleanor Jenkins, given confidently at the entrance. The penthouse event space atop the Atherton Tower glittered, offering breathtaking views of the Philadelphia skyline, filled with the city's architectural, financial, and social elite. Richard and Chloe stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, holding court, accepting congratulations, radiating smug success. Chloe flashed her enormous diamond ring. Richard pontificated about his design vision for the tower they stood in. Ellie moved through the room, accepting a glass of sparkling water, nodding coolly to acquaintances who stared with undisguised curiosity. She waited patiently through cocktails, through hors d'oeuvres. The moment came, as she knew it would, when Richard tapped a champagne flute for attention, ready to make a toast. He thanked everyone for coming, boasted about the Atherton project's success, then raised his glass to Chloe, beaming. And finally, he declared, to my beautiful fiancée, Chloe, the inspiration for so much of my recent success, and the woman with whom I plan to build an incredible future. Before the polite applause could swell, Ellie stepped forward, positioning herself where most of the room could see her. Her voice, calm but carrying undeniable authority, cut through the expectant hush. An incredible future indeed, Richard, she began, offering him a chillingly sweet smile, although perhaps one requiring some significant financial and leadership restructuring at its foundation. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Richard glared at her, furious at the interruption. Eleanor, what is the meaning of this? This is highly inappropriate. Is it? Ellie countered smoothly. I thought an engagement party, especially one celebrating the future of the man behind Davies Design Group, held in his signature building, was the perfect venue to discuss the company's future ownership. She paused, letting her gaze sweep the room, landing back on Richard's increasingly panicked face. As many of you know, my late Uncle Marcus Sinclair was a significant, albeit quiet, long-term investor in Richard's firm. She let that sink in. His will was recently finalized through Mr. Harrison Bell's office. She nodded slightly towards Bell, who she'd made sure was invited, and stood observing discreetly near the back. And I was rather surprised to learn the full extent of Marcus's holdings. Specifically, she delivered the first blow, her voice ringing with clarity, the controlling interest, 51% equity, plus decisive debt notes in Davies Design Group, which means... She smiled again, wider this time. As of last month, effective upon probate clearance, I am the new majority owner and controlling party of Richard's company. Utter shock silenced the room. Jaws dropped. Richard stared at her, speechless, his face draining of all color. Chloe looked utterly bewildered, glancing between Richard and Ellie. Before Richard could find his voice, Ellie pressed her advantage, holding up the slim binder containing the forensic audit summary. And as the new majority owner, she continued, her tone hardening, becoming all business, my first fiduciary duty was to commission a thorough, independent forensic audit of the company's finances over the past 5 years. She opened the binder. The results, unfortunately, reveal extensive irregularities. She looked directly at Richard, her voice sharp now. Systematic embezzlement through inflated invoices funneled to shell corporations, substantial kickbacks from preferred contractors on major projects including this Atherton Tower. She paused, then held up a copy of the forged loan document. And most seriously, Richard, this $3 million business loan from First Provident Bank, secured 2 years ago using demonstrably forged spousal signatures, my signature, on personal guarantee documents collateralizing marital assets based on wildly inflated company financials submitted to the bank. She let her gaze drift towards Chloe, whose face now registered dawning horror, then back to Richard, whose carefully constructed world was visibly shattering. Funds, Ellie concluded coldly, which the audit trail shows were largely diverted for non-business expenses, luxury travel, expensive jewelry, undisclosed cash withdrawals. I imagine the district attorney's white-collar crime unit and First Providence fraud division, both of whom Mr. Bell has already preliminarily briefed, will be very interested in discussing these findings further. The room erupted, not in applause but in chaos. Richard lunged forward, sputtering incoherently, Lies! It's all lies! Forgery! You can't prove! But he was physically restrained by one of his now horrified senior partners. Chloe shrieked, backing away from Richard as if he were suddenly toxic. Forged signatures! Embezzlement! Richard, what have you done? Guests were whispering frantically, edging away, phones likely discreetly recording. Business associates exchanged alarmed glances, calculating their own exposure. Mr. Bell quietly signaled associates near the door, who discreetly alerted building security and perhaps the waiting authorities. Chloe, realizing in an instant that the wealthy, powerful man she was engaged to was actually a broke, potentially criminal fraudster, let out another piercing scream, ripped the engagement ring off her finger, threw it blindly towards Richard, it bounced off a retreating guest, and fled the party in tears. Richard stood alone, surrounded by the ruins of his life, his face a mask of disbelief and terror, possibly flanked now by discreetly arriving plainclothes officers or bank investigators alerted by Bell. Ellie watched the implosion for only a moment longer. She hadn't needed to raise her voice, hadn't needed tears or hysterics. She had simply presented the cold, hard truth. She placed the audit summary binder calmly on a nearby table. "My lawyers will be in touch regarding the company restructuring," she stated quietly, addressing Richard's stunned partners more than Richard himself. Then, turning away from the chaos, she walked calmly towards the elevators, head held high. Months later, Eleanor Jenkins stood on the balcony of her new Center City apartment, looking out at the Philadelphia skyline. She was cancer-free, her health fully restored. Davies Design Group, under new management appointed by her and Mr. Bell after Richard's swift removal and subsequent indictment on multiple counts of bank fraud and embezzlement, was undergoing a painful but necessary ethical restructuring. Arthur Vance had quietly ensured Richard received competent legal defense, but offered no financial bailout. Richard's legal fate remained pending, his professional career definitively over. Ellie had channeled a significant portion of her inheritance from Uncle Marcus into expanding his charitable foundation, focusing on supporting arts education and ethical business leadership programs, finding deep purpose in that work, occasionally collaborating again with her old mentor, Eleanor Sterling. Her relationships with her children, Michael and Emily, were slowly healing, built now on a foundation of honesty about their father's failings and her own quiet strength. She thought occasionally of Richard not with anger or pity, but with a distant sense of melancholy for the potential wasted, the trust broken. Her revenge, if it could be called that, hadn't been about destruction. It had been about reclaiming her life, her name, her power, her future. It had been about ensuring that integrity in the end prevailed. Taking a deep breath of the clean city air, Eleanor Jenkins felt profoundly, peacefully free. This narrative is a testament to quiet strength and the power of truth emerging even after years of manipulation and betrayal. It illustrates that true resilience isn't about avoiding hardship, but about how one responds when faced with devastating adversity like illness and infidelity. While patience and loyalty are virtues, they should never require sacrificing one's own integrity or well-being indefinitely. The story shows that unexpected allies in unforeseen circumstances, like a carefully crafted will, can provide leverage for justice. Ultimately, it's a story about reclaiming one's identity, finding purpose beyond prescribed roles, and understanding that the most profound vindications comes not from revenge, but from rebuilding a life grounded in personal strength, ethical choices, and hard-won peace.